What if the biggest flaw in One Piece isn't power scaling, but the fact that half the Straw Hat crew barely exists anymore? Because once you really start paying attention, it becomes impossible to ignore. Jinbei joins late, sure, that's understandable, but the real issue isn't when someone joins, it's what happens after. And for a huge portion of this crew, what happens after is almost nothing. Usopp fades, Frankie stalls. Chopper loops the same beats. Brook shows flashes, then disappears again. And meanwhile, every arc keeps circling back to the same core. Luffy, Zoro, Sanji. Then maybe Nami, maybe Robin, over and over again. It's not even subtle anymore, it's a pattern. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. We're in the final saga. There is no more later. If these characters don't evolve now, they never will. That's what makes this feel less like pacing and more like imbalance. Because think about how massive this crew actually is. 11 members, 11 distinct roles, 11 different dreams. And yet, when the stakes hit their highest point, only a handful consistently carry the weight of the story. That's not just a writing choice, that's a structural risk. Because One Piece has always sold itself as a story about a crew, not just a captain and his top fighters. The emotional core of this series isn't just Luffy becoming Pirate King, it's every single member reaching their own version of the impossible. So when half of them feel stuck, the entire journey starts to feel uneven. And people are noticing. You see it in every discussion. People questioning why Usopp hasn't had a real breakthrough since Dressrosa. That was his moment, his peak. The god-level bluff that turned into reality. The sniper who changed the tide of an entire country. And then, nothing. Wano comes and he's background noise. Elbaf is supposed to be his arc, the land of giants, the place that ties directly into his dream of becoming a brave warrior of the sea. And yet, there's this growing fear that even here, he might not get the spotlight he deserves. That's not a small concern. That's a potential collapse of payoff. Because Usopp isn't just comic relief. He represents something very specific. He's the most human member of the crew. No broken lineage, no overpowered abilities handed to him. Just fear, doubt, and the constant struggle to push past both. That's why his growth matters more than almost anyone else's. If he doesn't rise here, what was the point of building him this way? And yet, there's this extreme reaction forming around that frustration. Some people don't just want development, they want sacrifice. They're saying maybe the only way to fix this imbalance is to remove characters entirely, kill someone off, force Luffy to confront his limitations, shock the story into a new direction. And the name that keeps coming up is Usopp, which sounds insane at first, until you realize what they're actually reacting to. They're not asking for death because they hate the character. They're asking for impact because they feel like he's been sidelined. It's a desperation move, because when a character stops evolving, the audience starts looking for any kind of resolution, even a tragic one. But here's the problem with that idea. Killing Usopp doesn't fix the imbalance, it erases it. And those are not the same thing. Because the moment you remove the most human character from the crew, you don't make the story stronger, you make it colder, more distant, less relatable. Usopp is the grounding force. He's the reminder that not everyone in this world is built like a monster. And that contrast is essential. Without it, the Straw Hats stop feeling like a crew of dreamers and start feeling like a lineup of demigods. And maybe that sounds cool on paper, until you realize what it costs. Because this is where the power scaling conversation starts creeping in. People look at Luffy now and they see a problem. Gear 5, Nika, reality-bending abilities, the kind of power that doesn't just win fights, it changes the rules of the fight itself. And then they look at the rest of the crew and think, how do you even keep up with that? Zoro and Sanji make sense. They're built for this. They've always been the frontline monsters. Their growth is expected. Their ceilings feel limitless. But what about Nami? What about Frankie? What about Chopper? Do you just keep boosting them until everyone feels equally overpowered? Or do you accept that not every member is meant to stand at the same level? Because One Piece has always walked that line carefully. Take Nami, for example. On paper, controlling the weather sounds insane. It should be one of the most broken abilities in the series. But in execution, it's always been situational, unstable, dependent on tools. Even with Zeus, there's still a sense that she hasn't fully mastered what she has. That gap is intentional. It keeps her grounded. It gives her room to grow. But if that growth never comes, it stops feeling like potential and starts feeling like stagnation. Same with Frankie. A cyborg with access to advanced technology should be evolving constantly, especially now with Vegapunk's influence shaping the entire narrative. There's a clear path for him to become something extraordinary, not just a fighter, but a living weapon on the level of ancient technology. And yet, most of the time, he's treated like a side act, a spectacle, something cool to look at but not essential to the core conflict. That's a waste of concept. And Chopper might be the most frustrating example of all. This is a character who once terrified enemies with Monster Point, a transformation that felt dangerous, unstable, almost uncontrollable. Now, it's just another form. Managed, timed, predictable. He went from being a wild card to being a tool. And that shift matters, because unpredictability is what makes a character exciting. When you remove that, you remove tension. And then there's Brook, who somehow is both one of the most unique characters in the entire series and one of the easiest to overlook. His soul-based abilities open doors to some of the strangest, most creative combat possibilities in One Piece, and occasionally we see glimpses of that. Moments where he feels unstoppable, moments where he feels terrifying, and then he vanishes again, like the story itself forgets what it can do with him. At this point, it's not about whether these characters are strong enough, it's about whether they're being used at all. And that's where the real tension lies heading into the final saga. Because the scale of the story is exploding. We're not dealing with isolated arcs anymore. This is a global conflict, multiple factions, Marines, Revolutionary Army, Yonko remnants, the world government, ancient weapons, secrets that have been buried for centuries. This is the kind of stage where every character should have a role, not just in combat, but in meaning, in impact, in consequence. And if half the crew remains underutilized, that scale starts to feel hollow. Because what's the point of a massive war if only a few people actually matter? But here's the twist that makes this even more complicated. Trying to give everyone equal spotlight might actually break the story in a different way. Because with 11 crew members, equal focus becomes impossible without slowing everything down. And at this stage, the story doesn't have time to slow down. It's accelerating towards its end. So now Oda is stuck in a very specific tension. Focus on the core and risk sidelining the rest, or spread the focus and risk losing momentum. There's no perfect solution, only trade-offs. And you can see the audience splitting because of that. Some people accept the hierarchy. They're fine with Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji dominating the spotlight. To them, that's the structure. That's the identity of the crew. Others want balance. They want every member to have a defining moment, a scene that proves they belong here at the end of the world. And then there's the extreme side, the ones who would rather see characters removed entirely than continue existing without purpose. That's how serious this imbalance feels to some people. But there's one more angle that changes how all of this should be viewed: time. Within the story itself, the Straw Hats haven't actually been together that long. Strip away the arcs, the battles, the time skips, and the actual time spent sailing as a crew is surprisingly short, less than a year in total before the time skip, not that much more after. And yet, people expect massive personality shifts, complete transformations, instant mastery of abilities. That expectation might be unrealistic. Growth takes time, and One Piece has always been about long-term payoff. The problem is, we're running out of road. So the real question isn't whether every character can become equally strong.
It's whether every character can feel equally necessary, because strength alone was never the point. Usopp doesn't need to become the strongest sniper in the world overnight. He needs a moment that proves he's indispensable. Nami doesn't need to control the entire climate of the planet. She needs a moment where only she can navigate the impossible. Franky doesn't need to outclass ancient weapons. He needs to create something that changes the outcome of a war. Chopper doesn't need to become invincible. He needs to save someone no one else could. And Brook doesn't need constant spotlight. He needs one moment that reminds everyone why he's terrifying. That's the difference. And if the final saga delivers those moments, the imbalance disappears. Not because everyone becomes equal, but because everyone matters. And if it doesn't,
then this won't be remembered as a story where every dream came true. It'll be remembered as a story where only a few did. And for a series built on the idea of a crew chasing impossible dreams together, that might be the biggest weakness of all.
If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe and hit the bell to the later update from my channel. Thank you for watching till the end and see you in the next video.